So I think a lot of the times, like when we go through something traumatic, we almost like stop our growth. We can kind of become that 10-year-old self. And when we have to make decisions, we create patterns of protection. And sometimes you get stinted at that age. And so that version of yourself is really in the driver's seat, and they should not be. They should be acknowledged that they're there, but they should not be making the decisions. And so for the longest time, subconsciously, I was acting out of this 10-year-old who was afraid, giving the power to everybody else, or also maybe just flippant, and I didn't want to deal with anything. So those were a lot of the behaviors and the personality traits that I started, creating along my journey, which is not my soul, not the woman who is wise. But my 10-year-old was definitely running the show.
Hello, Heal Squad. Welcome back. Glad to be with you today. We have a really great friend of mine in studio that I'm so excited to share with you guys. But first, we'll start with our quote of the day. When we learn how to become resilient, we learn how to embrace the beautifully broad spectrum of the human experience. That is from Jada DeWalt. Ooh, resilience. Isn't that such an important trait for us to have? Friends, my friend Julianne Hough is an example of resilience. She is our guest today. I'm so excited to have her here. She's a multi-talented actress, singer, dancer, entrepreneur, Emmy Award-winning choreographer. She gained fame as a two-time champion on Dancing with the Stars and starring in films like Footloose, Burlesque, and Dirty Grandpa. Julianne is returning to the ballroom to host the upcoming 33rd season of Dancing with the Stars. Her debut album topped the Billboard country charts. She's made her Broadway debut in POTUS, which I went to see her in, and she was incredible. As an entrepreneur, she founded her Kinrgy company, partnered with Exponential Fitness, and launched Canary House Productions. Her latest book that we're going to be chatting about today is called Everything We Never Knew. Julianne delves into her own personal struggles and shares her experiences in the last almost decade. She's really gone through the ringer. She's had a lot of rough times. Despite the beautiful, happy demeanor you see on the outside, she's really gone through a lot on the inside. And she is the picture of resilience because she really went through it. She faced her stuff, and she has come out the other side, and she's sharing all of this through this character in this book. She talks to us about this moment at Tony Robbins 7 years ago where she had this mystical experience that really led her to discover a lot of personal traumas that she thought started age 10 and after, but she realized that there were so many more before then that she had to deal with. So this book is riveting. I loved it. And I think that we'll all get to learn through her story in a really interesting way. So I hope you guys enjoy my conversation and, of course, the book, Everything We Never Knew, with Julianne Hough. Jules,
Maria,
welcome to the Heal Squad.
I'm so happy to be here.
It's been a long time coming.
It has. I'm, first of all, just so happy that you're doing this because we have been on this journey for a long time together.
I know.
And you took it and you created something really, really special and beautiful to be the ripple effect of change. So I'm just really proud of you as a woman.
Thank you. Yeah. Back to our Tony Robbins days.
Oh, yeah.
So funny.
That was 2014.
Yeah.
Wow.
A long time ago.
10 years ago.
Yeah. It's wild. You know, the journey never ends.
Never. You say that with hope and with like never.
Well, I feel like you did Dr. Joe already too.
I actually have never done his full immersive experience, but
Okay.
I've met him a few times and we've done like a private event up in Santa Barbara with some women, and
Okay.
that was very life-changing.
Yeah.
He actually wrote a blurb for the book.
I know,
Yeah.
I saw that.
Yeah.
Okay, so friends, Jules is in today. We're talking about her new book, Everything We Never Knew. It's a novel. I was telling her this morning, I don't read novels. That sounds weird, probably. I don't know. But I've been so self-help queen since I was little. Like since my teenage years, I just always wanted to be better because I was just treading water. I just needed help, guys.
Yeah.
So whether it was Chicken Soup for the Soul or whatever, but there were some novels back then, if I think about it, that did creep in because I did, read the Nancy Drews and I was in a John Grisham for a little while.
Yeah.
But then it really just went full tilt, self-help.
Very similar, by the way.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, obviously, like I loved Harry Potter and the Twilight books, and that was definitely my thing. But then, as you get older, you're like, how can I actually, help and grow as a human? So you go more into the self-help, self-discovery books. But as I was sharing with you, before,
as we had our mushroom coffee
yes,
in
we
my
did.
kitchen.
Prior to this, I really wanted to write a novel because I feel like sometimes whatever season of life you're in or whatever stage of transformation you're in or healing, diving into another person's journey that's fiction can feel a little less intimidating than me doing an autobiography being like, and here are my circumstances and situations that happened to my life that it made me create this pattern, which can be helpful, but also you're just seeing my experiences, and those are quite unique.
And they can be heavy too.
And they can be heavy. And then you have compassion for me reading it, but I really wanted people to go on a journey of their own self-discovery through this character. I've done a lot of my own healing and my journey, so that was for me, and I want to be able to pass that on and pay it forward. So a lot of my tools and experiences that I went through for my journey are in the book, but through fiction, the reader is allowed to see themselves as the hero in the journey, going on that hero's journey.
So you clearly wanted to tell the story, but you found a unique way to do it.
Yes.
What did your friends and family think when you said, I'm going to tell my story, but this is the way I'm going to do it?
I mean, all of them were like, of course you are, because it's just like another form of creative expression. But one of the things that I realized through this process and actually doing a lot of the press for the book was like, I'm a little confusing, like what do I do? How am I identified? Am I a dancer? Am I an actress? Am I an entrepreneur? I'm a storyteller, and I tell stories through my body, through acting, through anything, but the through line has usually been about transformation. And this way just felt like another way for people to receive information. Some people want to be entertained by going to the movies or listening to music or reading a book. And however it hits for somebody is, I don't know, just the goal.
Yeah, it's interesting. The last 2 Christmas movies I was a part of, I kept trying to add in little elements of inspiration and transformation to kind of just
put your magic, you put your magic to it.
And so
I always say encoded energy. I always try to encode the energy with and infuse it with something.
Yeah. Because I feel like it's so easy to keep it surface, but then why not? Why not have somebody take something like when you watch Rocky or any of the most inspirational movies, Miracle, another sports movie. I love sports movies, but you watch them and they inspire you and they move you. And they help you.
You're watching a sports movie, but underneath it, you're watching this complex human experience.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so that's why I think entertainment is so amazing, because you can learn from it.
Yes.
And so that's what this is. Like, we're learning through this character, Lexi's journey.
Yes. So when I was thinking about some of my favorite books, Memoirs of a Geisha, I loved Big Fish. I loved The Green Mile. I mean, those are all stories of, honestly, imprisonment and elaborating on what's possible. And so I was like, wow, that's how I learned things. Or watching the movie The Never-Ending Story and Labyrinth, and I'm like, no wonder I have all of this like insight into self-discovery and transformation or healing, because those are the things that I was drawn to. And so thinking, whoever's listening right now, like what are the forms of entertainment? You love sports movies, but with that thing underneath it that like really shows the discovery. And so like thinking about what you're drawn to, there's usually wisdom in that, because you're like, oh, that's what I am drawn to. That's what I know is within me that I want to discover. So that's why with this book, it was like, this is my journey of the last probably 6 years of my spiritual activation, the unraveling, the sitting in the, like, what I like to call the death hole pit of shit, where you have to integrate all of the unraveling and sit there and be still. And then the transformation happens, and then you can actually create the life that you want to intentionally design versus just falling into it. So that's what this book is encoded with, that journey.
So what was the journey writing it like?
It was cathartic. It was really fun because, again, it's fiction. I could heighten the experiences. I had a lot of supernatural experiences, which is what Lexi goes through as well, with like my senses being heightened. So I could feel like I could see color, and I could hear things, I could smell things and taste things. I definitely could feel things energetically and empathically, to the point where I was almost having these experiences where I'd be like, I don't know why, but this just popped into my head. Did you have a dog at 12 years old that was black and white? And then it would spawn into a conversation of something that this person had experienced. And so these things were truly happening to me. But with fiction, you can really make it bigger so people can really see it and visualize it and get, immersed into that world. So that was kind of the beginning of it. I was able to like write this and tell my story, but in a very heightened way.
Which is so cool.
Yeah.
I think, I could hear your voice. That was one of the things I thought was so cool, because obviously you wrote it with Ellen Goodlett. And I want to know a little bit about what that process is like, but I could hear you. I knew it was you. And then, there were moments where I was like, wait, did this happen to her? Like, you don't know which did or which didn't, but the Henry moment, when you talked about being on stage and how it was never an easy thing, I was like, wait, she's been on stage her whole life. So is that her? Did you ever have that? Was that a true experience, that whole kind of opening sequence?
Yeah, that opening sequence in chapter 1 is like the moment when she realizes, oh my gosh, I'm having these supernatural experiences. What is happening to me? Which is the activation of, what's going to start threatening the relationships around her, and the unraveling of everything that she put in this tight box of everything is perfect. And what ends up happening is she sees Henry, who she doesn't really know, but as he walks forward to sit at the banquet table at her real estate gala, where she's going to go up on stage and accept her award, she sees Henry, this man, and she doesn't know Henry, by the way, doesn't know that's his name, but she sees him come forward, and she sees this like dark cloud, this aura around him, and she's all of a sudden feels like, ooh, I can taste salt water. Yeah, I can taste salt water, and like, oh, I feel like my lungs are closing off, like I'm almost drowning. And now all of a sudden I'm hearing this woman's voice screaming, help, help, save him, Henry, save him. And she's like, is anybody else hearing this? Nobody's hearing this. When he ends up leaving, that experience goes away, and she's like back into that gala. And so I definitely had an experience like that. Obviously that was much more heightened for the book, but it was actually at a Tony Robbins seminar. It was in 2017, and there was this woman who I had met but didn't really know. She was a few rows in front of me, and we were doing one of those meditations that you do in the seminar. And I remember as I was sitting there, I was like, this doesn't feel like mine. But I felt like I was, I don't know, 3, 4, 5 years old. I could smell mold, and so I was like, I feel like, I don't know where I'm at, but I feel like I'm in Europe right now. My hair feels wet, I feel cold, and I feel rushed. And then all of a sudden I was like, ooh, I feel like I am abandoned right now by my dad. whoa. And I started having these feelings. I was like, this is definitely, I don't know, this doesn't feel like mine. And then all of a sudden I stood up and my like heart opened, my arms flew back, and I was like, whoa, I feel so loved by my parents. And that was all in the span of this like 10-minute meditation. When I opened my eyes, I just knew that it was this woman in front of me. So I went up to her and I asked her, I was like, do you mind sharing what your meditation was? She goes, it was really profound. She's like, I had this memory back when I was like a little girl and I was living in Copenhagen with my family. And my mom was at the hospital already because she was having my little brother. And so my dad was rushing to get us out of the house. And I remember him like blow drying my hair because he didn't want me to catch a cold because my hair was wet. We had just got out of the shower. So we rushed. And then when we got to the hospital, he just left me in the waiting room. And I just remember feeling so abandoned by my dad. And then she goes, and then the weirdest thing happened. I like stood up, my heart opened, my hands went behind me, and I just felt this immense amount of love from my family. Oh, I missed out one other part. When she said that she felt abandoned, she also said, and because my brother had autism when he was born, I never felt like I was prioritized my entire life. From that moment, I felt abandoned. And then she said, and then I stood up,
Wow.
my hands went behind me, my heart opened, and she's like, I just felt all this immense love from my family. And I was like, what the F? I was like, that was my first experience having something like that. And so I was like, whoa, this is possible. This is something that like is within us. And Dr. John Amaral was also there. And I told him what happened. He was like, yeah, just know you've been living in a box like this. Your experience and your expansion, you're going to start opening up this way of all these like beautiful gifts, and things are going to start opening up. But just know it's going to start opening up this way too. And you're going to be able to now feel the expanse of the highs and the lows. It's not just this tight box where everything's just fine. And that was the beginning of like all these magical, mystical things happening and activated, and I was cultivating them, and then at the same time also feeling the things that I had suppressed for so long, and those starting to come up too. So, that's why I was like, I want to tell my story, but is anybody going to believe me? Is this like,
so if you fictionalize it, then, somehow it's a little safer.
It's safer. It is. Yeah.
So what were some of the things that you suppressed?
Definitely childhood, and I've talked about this now, but childhood, some things that happened to me prior to 10 years old, because I always thought that all my trauma started from like 10 years old on, because that's what I could remember, and I really couldn't remember my childhood, but those things started coming up, and I was like, oh my gosh. It's almost like EMDR, when you start, using the left hemisphere and the right hemisphere, and they start actually talking and communicating together, because they don't ever communicate at the same time. It's one or the other. And when you do EMDR, that's what happens. But also with the tools that Lexi goes on in this journey, which I went on in my journey, I used a lot of the elements, earth, fire, water, and air, because we're made up of the elements as well, to really use that wisdom that lies within yourself, and trusting, and it's very similar process. You ask yourself questions, and when you tap into that inner knowing, all of a sudden the answers start coming up, and memories start coming up that you suppressed and locked away. And so when that all started coming up, went on this massive healing journey and did a lot of inner child work, and really showed up as like what my little girl needed. But I couldn't have got to be there unless I actually dropped into a woman, because for the longest time I was acting out of a subconscious 10-year-old self for the last 25 years.
How did you learn all of that? How did you learn you were acting like that? And how did you, and what modalities were you using?
So I think a lot of the times, like when we go through something traumatic, we almost like stop our growth. We can kind of become that 10-year-old self. And when we have to make decisions, we create patterns of protection. And sometimes you get stinted at that age. And so that version of yourself is really in the driver's seat, and they should not be. They should be acknowledged that they're there, but they should not be making the decisions. And so for the longest time, subconsciously, I was acting out of this 10-year-old who was afraid, giving the power to everybody else, or also maybe just flippant, and I didn't want to deal with anything. So those were a lot of the behaviors and the personality traits that I started, creating along my journey, which is not my soul, not the woman who is wise. But my 10-year-old was definitely running the show. And so I had to go through a healing journey, and that was a lot through Dr. John Amaral. There was a lot through this elemental work.
What's elemental work?
So I started Kinrgy, which was something that I feel like I downloaded, and like really channeled, because I was writing things down that I didn't even know I knew, but then I would go and like look and read books, and I'd be like, oh, this is ancient wisdom that's just coming through me through my expression, which is dance. And so elemental work is much more on the shamanistic side of things. It's like tapping into nature and the wisdom of the planet. And so for some reason, the elements are very much part of what I call in. And funny enough, if I look at my history, I've called in the elements in many different things that I've done. Derek and I did a tour in 2017 before any of this started happening. And it was all based in the elements. And that was like, I felt that. I wanted to bring that forth. So clearly there's some sort of connection with the elements in me. So,
but how do you work with them? Like someone who's listening right now is like, what does this mean?
What does this mean? Yes. So in fact, if you get the book, there's a QR code in the back, and you can take a quiz to figure out what your elemental constitution is. And so to give you a little bit more of a basis, so you can do these like visualizations, they're meditations where you can actually connect to the energy of Earth. So it's a little hard to articulate without actually taking you through a process, but it's a meditative visualization where you activate your senses, like what do I hear, what do I smell, what do I taste, and you go and connect to that childlike wonderment, creativity, imagination state, so that you can get out of like your head, your thinking mind, and get more into your body and your creativity. And you connect to that element, whether it be earth or fire or water or air, and visualize. So like if I'm in water, I'll like roll my eyes back and like just imagine me laying on a body of water and like feeling what that feels like. Is it cold? What's the temperature? Is it still water? Is it a river? Like just imagining what I want to feel right there in that moment. And then our body doesn't lie. Our body, the body keeps the score. Like we know that. All the information is held in our body. So if we can surrender our mind to our body, we're being held by the water, we're just actually surrendering, and you ask yourself, what is the energy that water is giving to me in this moment right now? All of a sudden, just answers start coming through, and you can actually hear the wisdom of the water of your body, and it goes into that process, sort of like EMDR, where all of a sudden you're clear and you can hear yourself and you can trust yourself, because it is that deep inner wisdom. So it's hard.
Wow.
Again, it's hard to explain without doing a proper process.
That was really good, though. I felt that.
Thank you.
I could see that. So did you do that with somebody?
So Scott Picard was one of the people that I found while I was downloading this modality with Kinrgy, and he was doing this thing called fire sessions. And I was like, fire sessions? That's clearly up my alley. I was like, I'm all into the elements. So I went and took a class of his. And he was doing that exact process. And he had been doing this for 13 years. And so I really got curious and started diving into a lot of his teachings. And again, it's not his intuition or anything. It's your own, and you connecting to the elements. So it was a beautiful realization that the power really does lie within you. And if you can tap in and go inward and actually surrender to it, all of the everything that you need to hear or know to be true is already there, and it will come up.
So 2017, you're at Tony, you have this
mystical experience. Yeah.
Then you started hearing stuff, maybe started remembering things and starting to realize that there's other trauma that needs to be addressed. How dark does it get when you have to feel all those things for the first time?
I think for anybody, like, pain is the thing that we want to avoid the most, right? And so it's like, to feel that pain is tough, but I think that there's also something so powerful about owning and accepting your wounds, because the minute you do, that charge that is within you, it just dissipates. It's like, if you don't acknowledge it, it becomes a thing that lives within you, versus, oh yeah, I own and I acknowledge my wounds, and whatever darkness is under there, it doesn't have the power anymore because I own it and I accept it.
How do you do that, though?
Oh, you have to acknowledge first what it is, find what that is, and then instead of resisting it and not wanting to feel the pain, that will find you whenever you're least expecting it. So, whatever you resist persists, and whatever you avoid is the thing that's going to set you free. And so identifying it is the hardest part, but you have to be still enough. You have to, go inward. You have to feel that pain. And then the minute you do, it's like, oh, I own that. I accept that. And now it's not that it goes away, but it dissipates that charge of like feeling like it has control over you and you want to push it down because you don't want to feel that. I mean, the anxiety, it's all energy, right? And so if you can just own it and accept it. I know it sounds like easier said than done, and it is. It is easier said than done. But when you really go through it, I mean, what's on the other side is like absolute knowing and clarity and trust and peace. And that's why, again, with this book, it's like, these were the things that I went on, but it is possible for everyone. And if you can see yourself in this journey, they're all universal themes, right, that we go through. There's loss, there's grief, there's abandonment, there's violation, there's betrayal, there's, all these things that are like these negative feelings or emotions that we all experience in different ways. But if you can acknowledge that those are happening and not try to suppress them, which Lexi does her entire upbringing, and then she finally goes through these lessons and she deals with them head on, they will set you free, and they will also be your greatest like sense of like self, but also your gifts and having empathy for other people too.
But as Tony taught us, we all want to avoid pain.
Yes.
And I know for me, for the Heal Squad, for all of us, like we just want to be happy. And so I feel like I've gone on such a journey myself, and I've met everything head on. But then there's, periods where you're just like, I don't want to do anymore.
Totally.
I want to be okay for now.
Yes.
Even if there is more. But I feel like once you start, and I want you to speak to this, once you start unraveling,
oh yeah,
it just keeps going.
Totally.
So have you found that like
there are moments of levity?
There's peace, and then you unravel, and then you peace?
Yes.
Okay.
100%. Because, by the way, all change all at once, that is overwhelming. And I mean, yeah. So like it's all about, and again, the elements help you tap into your body to trust your body, what it needs. And so it's like, if you're doing all of this at once, it can be so much. So tapping in, being like, okay, I did this period. I need a little levity in my life now. And I need to just put this on pause for a second and like get back to some levity and some joy and stuff.
Yeah.
And then, and it's seasons, right? And
you can't run 10 marathons back to back.
No.
You need a break.
You need a break. And it's all like, it's not linear either. And sometimes if you avoid, something will show up for you to deal with it.
When it's time.
And so, like one of my philosophies is self, others, world. It's like when you go on a healing journey, I believe it starts with self. And so that can unravel and then take a break. And then, what's going to happen around me? Once I start getting more into alignment with my soul, the things that aren't there to serve my highest good or the people around me anymore, like those will start trickling away. And not that people will trickle away, they will sometimes, and you might come back again, but like whatever dynamic or pattern that was created from that, that's the thing that's going to dissolve, which might shift the dynamic of your relationship, and then you can decide if you want to reclaim and start like a different kind, not a new, but just different, you know? And so I think the others part is like the next chapter of unraveling. And then the world part is like, you know, whether it's like your career, what you put out in the world, or, you know, your business side of things, or external, you know, sources, those things start unraveling as well. And it's a scary thing to be like, wow, my entire world is unraveling. But part of what like activated this, and if you believe in astrology, listen up. If you don't, like, this is just a fun story for you.
I love astrology.
But, you know, it's something called your Saturn return, which happens almost every 30 years. And so my whole thing was like, wow, I spent 30 years building up systems of protection to get me further away from myself and my wisdom. And I just spent the last 30 years unraveling all of this. Whew, that was a big feat. And I really created, you know, patterns of dissociation and avoidance, and let me just pivot when something goes wrong versus dealing. So like I had to really unravel a lot of that, and it unraveled my marriage and all sorts of things, you know. And when all that happened, I was like, okay, I don't want to spend the next 30 years getting further away from myself, so I have to do this 30 years, you know, of healing in the next 30 years. So I'm like, I'm hopeful that this was like the big chunk. This was the big chunk, but I committed to it, you know. I committed to it, and I was like, I'm not going to just, you know, go back to the old way. Do a third of it, or, you know, I'm gonna do it.
I watched you.
Yeah, and it has not been easy. But I will say that, oh my gosh, I am so much more intentional about the decisions that I'm making from a place of space versus clutter, of all these thoughts and opinions and things that are all external. And now I trust myself, and I've never been able to say that. And with that, I'm pretty certain I'm not going to have 30 years of unraveling by the time I'm 60.
Yeah.
I'm sure there'll be things, but I'm hoping that the journey just continues. And I look at it as a spiral, you know, spiral of unraveling. It's like it gets quicker and shorter, the lesson, you know, until you get to that spot.
Well, because you start to get it.
You start to get it. And so I'll have multiple spirals as I'm going and continuing to transform, but that doesn't mean I'm in the death hole pit of shit era forever.
Well, let's go to the dancing world. Like once you start learning how to do your spins, you don't get dizzy.
Exactly.
Right? So the more of them you're going through, you know, like I feel like when life hits now, it doesn't hit as hard because I get it.
I get it. I know how to do that.
You know, life is going to continue on.
Yeah.
Right? Like in the beginning, you think life is over.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. But then you see, like, life picks up and keeps on going.
It does.
Regardless.
It does.
So you don't have to, you know, it doesn't have to be that massive, like, halt.
Exactly.
But I do think it's important to share with everybody that, you know, you do need those breaks, because I remember when I was doing somatic therapy, I was going in deep. It was the time where my mom was dying, and then of course after she passed. And at some point, when I found Dr. Joe, started doing Dr. Joe, I started feeling unbelievable. And then I'd go to my therapy sessions, and I'd get so down again.
Yeah.
Because I'm drudging up all this stuff. And I was like, I don't want to feel like this anymore. I don't think I need this right now.
Yep.
I feel really good, and I think I need to ride that feel-good wave.
Totally. I mean, life is about expansion, contraction, or waves, or however you want to look at it. And, like, ride it, you know? And, like, there will be a season to maybe go back in for a little bit. But I did the same thing. Dr. Amen, you know, like, he's been great, too, after everything that happened with Derek and Haley. And I was like, I'm going to go get my brain checked, you know? And when I did that, you know, we did a couple of EMDR sessions, and I was like, you know what? I actually I actually don't want to go there right now. Like I've been in that place of dredging up a lot of that, and for years, and it was super helpful at the time. But I'm on this, upward spiral right now, and I'm gonna continue to go up right now. And then you know what? When I'm ready, I'm gonna come back in, and I'll filter things in and out as they come. But like, I need that levity.
Yeah.
You need to be able to ride the waves.
I'm so glad you just shared that. I feel like I pray sometimes where I'm like, God, because I'll always say, like, help me reach my highest potential and my, whatever. And I'm like, okay, just as long as it doesn't come with more pain for a little while. Like, because I know you have to grow.
Of course.
To reach your highest potentials. There's going to be pain points. So I'm like, we've had, a fair amount of that for a while. Can we just, sorry, my necklace is choking me.
Oh, no.
We've had a fair amount of that, so let's just,
Yeah.
And whatever we can do right now where we can be in a good place.
Yeah, totally. I feel you so hard on that. In fact, I was like, oh, I'm feeling really great. Let's ride this wave, and even starting to date again and all that. And I was like, okay, levity. Like, I have to remember how to date because I'm so used to like getting deep so fast. It's like, hang on, Jules, like not everybody needs to get, so deep on the first date. Like just levity, like learn how to have levity again in your life. So yeah, you almost have to learn how to have that side too once you've gone so deep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So funny. You guys also know that Way is my go-to for all things hair care right now. I'm obsessed with their leave-in conditioner. Right now I have my hair oil in that I am loving. But we are transitioning into fall. And of course, my favorite hack is to make sure that my ends are hydrated and frizz-free all day. So using their hair oil on the tips of my hair while it's wet has really been a game changer for me. You got to try it because I'm telling you, it really works. And it doesn't get gooey and thick and heavy, which is what I love. So any listeners who are eager to elevate their hair care routine, try out Way products. You can use the promo code HEALSQUAD and get 15% off. So just head over to theway.com. That's THEOUAI.com. You can also take a quiz that they have that helps you figure out what hair care products are right for your hair type. Pretty fun. All right. Jules, the book. What was the writing process like for you with your writing partner? How does it work when you're writing it with somebody?
So I first hired Ellen Goodlett as a ghostwriter because that was sort of what I thought I was supposed to do. And
isn't this so funny? We've been talking all morning before this about how things are supposed to be done.
Yes.
Right? And I think you're finding out, and I've been finding out for many years now, that most of these systems are lame.
They're so lame and they're so old.
Yes.
And we're evolving. Why are these systems not evolving?
Mm-hmm. Well, we have to do it, but we also have to tell people that that's the case.
And that there are systems. That there are even systems, because we don't even realize they're systems. You just are told this is how it's supposed to be, and then you just
and
do
you
it.
think that this is the professional way to do it, and so you have to do it. Kevin's been the one who has taught me a lot about bucking the system, because I was like nerd, perfect attendance, have to do everything like the way they teach you,
by the
blah,
book.
blah, blah, by the book. And Kevin's like the rebel. No, that's bullshit.
Totally.
That doesn't even work. Why are you doing it this way? And he just flips everything upside down. And you're like, oh, I didn't know you could do that.
Exactly.
So friends, if you're listening,
it's time to flip the switch.
Flip the switch and do things your way. What feels right to you? So obviously you flipped the switch here, and I can't wait to hear.
I did, yeah. So she was supposed to be a ghostwriter, and as we were going through this writing process, I'm very high concept. Obviously, this came from my personal experiences, and I am very much in the healing space of like curiosity and wanting to share my knowledge. So I was able to, give her all of this substance and context and everything. But I'm like, I did not spend my life learning how to be a novelist. Like, that is not my skill set. My skill set is creating worlds and characters and giving the information needed. But I was like, I don't, speaking of my elements,
I love you.
like earth is not my strong suit.
Me neither.
And so earth is all about structure.
Yes.
And, coming up with goals and, figuring out when this needs to be turned in and all of the things that I was just like, where would I even begin?
Yeah.
So we had weekly conversations. She would go back and she would write things. We would come back. I'd be like, this doesn't feel right, or like this isn't how I pictured it. So we would meld, or she would come up with something. I'd be like, oh my gosh, I never even would have thought of that. That is so good, and that is so exactly what I experienced, or like the feeling that came from it. Mm-hmm. So it was so amazing. I loved her. But I will say, like, it was during the time also when I was like in my unraveling. So I was not in my most expanded state, which is what this book is. It's her activation with all the gifts. I was in the unraveling state, so I was not in a good place. And she was so patient. She was so, like, she gave me the space to also go through what I was going through, and then be able, when I had those little moments of levity, come back in and almost bring more information and knowledge and healing and wisdom, because I allowed myself that space to sit. And she was so patient. I mean, she did say, like, I don't know if this book is ever coming out. She's like, I know it's a long process, but it's never been this long for me.
Yeah.
But it was great. I mean, I think she was also really excited because as a ghostwriter, she's mainly done that. She's like, my whole thing is to pull from, the celebrity or whoever I'm ghostwriting for, from their well. And so she was so good at pulling from my well, and then, and then
adding from hers,
and
maybe
then
too.
adding from hers too. And when I read her work, I was like, this is who I want to write with, because she does fantasy, but it's all rooted in reality, and it is so grounded. And so I was like, this is my girl. And it was great. And now what's cool is she's going through her unraveling right now. And so we're like, we already know what book 2 is already. You know what I mean? We're ready to write book 2. I'm currently in book 3, which is like the creation now, because I did the unraveling. So it's cool. Like she's like, I also like wrote this without going through the experience that you did, Julianne, but now I'm going through it. So
That's gonna
I'm
help
almost,
her.
so I'm almost like referring back to what we wrote and being like, oh, it's going to be okay.
Wow.
So it was really cool to like have that conversation with her when we were on our book tour. She was like, it's wild. It's like I'm experiencing what we wrote about now. And I'm having something to reference it to.
That's so cool. What I love about that is that, again, you're sharing your story in a way where we're getting to enjoy it as a story, but it's still going to help people, because everything that you're sharing right now with us here on Heal Squad, there's so many nuggets that you may not even realize you're just throwing out like it's nothing, but it's years of work that you've had to put in that now we get to benefit from.
Well, that's the encoded energy that's in the book. I wrote music for the book also, that every lesson that Lexi goes through, they're all within the elements earth, fire, water, and air. But I wrote a song, in air, she learns how to speak up for herself for the first time, because she's given her power to her coworker, who takes advantage of her and poaches her clients and all sorts of things for years. And finally she's like, wah, and she speaks up for herself because she uses the element of air to help her. So as she's going on this journey of transformation for herself, all those elements help her with those lessons. And so I wrote a song for each one too, because I was like, people receive information in different ways. Some people like music. Some people want to read a book. I did the narration for the book. You have the quiz. You can take Kinrgy. Like everything in this book has the through line of healing and going on this journey. So, for anybody listening to this podcast, if you buy the book and read it, or listen to the narration, or listen to the music that's out, or go take a Kinrgy class, it all ties together, because it's the same modalities that I learned through my healing journey, and I put it in everything that I just created with this project. And so yes, this story that Lexi goes on. I mean, people have already been DMing me and sending me messages being like, I feel like you wrote this for me. Like, I feel like I'm Lexi. And that is the greatest compliment because I'm also Lexi and you're also Lexi. And like, we have different circumstances of how we go on this journey, but we all go on this journey. It's the hero's journey.
Yeah, so true. We're going to stop right there and we are going to wrap it up for today. Come back tomorrow for part 2 with my friend Julianne Hough. In the meantime, friends, be nice people, make good choices, and be present.
This podcast and all related content published or distributed by or on behalf of Maria Menounos or MariaMenounos.com is for informational purposes only and may include information that is general in nature and that is not specific to you. Any information or opinions expressed or contained herein are not intended to serve as or replace medical advice, nor to diagnose, prescribe, or treat any disease, condition, illness, or injury, and you should consult the healthcare professional of your choice regarding all matters concerning your health, including before beginning any exercise, weight loss, or healthcare program. If you have or suspect you may have a healthcare emergency, please contact a qualified healthcare professional for treatment. Any information or opinions provided by a guest expert or host featured within website or on company's podcast are their own, not those of Maria Menounos or the company. Accordingly, Maria Menounos and the company cannot be responsible for any results or consequences or actions you may take based on information or opinions.